Welcome back to Ozarks Tonight. We'll just announce earlier this afternoon, after months of anticipation, presumptive Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has picked Kamala Harris to be his running mate. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano, is joining us this evening. Brian, what do you make of this finalized Democratic ticket?
I think if you're a Democrat, John, you got to be really enthusiastic about this. Kamala Harris is probably, pound for pound, the most qualified of any of those who are running on the Democratic side, aside from Joe Biden, in terms of experience in government and the ability to step into a pretty tumultuous political situation that the country's facing. And I think this pick was, for a number of reasons, good in the sense that it, one, advances Biden's concern about persons of color in high political office. In this case, obviously, everyone's going to be talking about the fact that Harris might be the first African-American vice president in history. And, you know, if she were to go on to win the presidency, obviously that would be historic as well, if she ends up running later on at some point. So this is really an opportunity for Biden to make as much of an appeal to the African-American community as possible. That's always a concern Democrats have, is whether or not there will be enough African-Americans who show up to vote to counterbalance whatever problems there might be in not having enough folks in the middle of the country, especially in a lot of the rural areas where Republicans are quite strong. You want to have as much turnout in a lot of urban areas as you possibly can, and that's essentially where African Americans and Latino voters especially are going to be pretty much determining, I think, a lot of what happens with this race, particularly in terms of the popular vote. And of course, Democrats want this popular vote to essentially be as much of a runaway victory for Biden as possible. This overall is a good pick for Biden, and I think it also speaks to the fact that he is comfortable with the idea of having somebody who's ready to lead if, God forbid, something were to happen to Biden should he win this race. It's very reminiscent in a much different way, of course, in terms of the demographic profile of Harris, but it's reminiscent of what George W. Bush did in 2000 when he picked Dick Cheney. Everybody was kind of going, Dick Cheney, you know, he was supposed to be the guy vetting all the vice presidential nominee candidates. And Bush essentially turned around and said, well, yes, but I wanted to pick somebody who I know, if something happened to me in the office, would be able to step in and to govern effectively on day one. And so that's a really important signal that Biden is sending to a lot of Democrats, independents, and even Republicans as we now begin to see sort of the final shape of how this race and this contest is going to be ending up.
A lot of people, when they hear this pick, they'll go back nearly a year ago or maybe more during the Democratic debate when Harris had come out strong in the first one, and then she attacked Biden in that debate, and it seemed like there's a little tit for tat between the two of them. Do you make anything of that, or is that political and bygones be bygones at this point?
Bygones be bygones. I mean, you look back, say Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush in 1980, people forget this, but Bush was running more to the middle of the Republican Party in terms of the ideology back then, and Reagan was on the right as a conservative. And they had some barbs go back and forth. There was not a tremendous amount of love between Reagan and H.W. Bush until the convention when Reagan ended up picking Bush as his vice presidential nominee. And of course, Bush was probably the most loyal, or one of the most loyal vice presidents in the history of the office. And so I don't think that there's going to be much hay made, at least for the Democrats on that count. Certainly you could imagine Republicans trying to make some attack ads against Biden, using Harris's own words against him in a campaign ad. But in the end, I think most people kind of have their minds made up at this point in terms of who they want to support. And whatever type of traction Republicans try to get from that kind of divide, I just don't see that having much in the way of an impact on Biden.
Well, the role of vice presidents can vary depending on who they are. In this ticket, how big of a role do you think Kamala Harris will take on? And, it's well publicized that the former vice president has not been the strongest public speaker from time to time. He'll occasionally put his foot in his mouth from time to time. How big of a role will Kamala Harris play on this ticket?
Big, a huge role. And I think that is a good and a bad thing for Biden. One, of course, it's good because she's really effective. She's a good speaker. She has a lot of experience, and she will, I think, give Vice President Pence a run for his money in their debate. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. The difficulty, though, is going to be that Harris is almost too good in a lot of ways. And it's going to be reminding folks that, okay, well, she's good, but she's not at the top of the ticket. And that's the other guy, right? The other person who apparently doesn't as you said, speak as much or make himself available for interviews as often. And so they have to be careful, John, with this campaign. They got to thread a needle between making Harris available and kind of putting her on the attack against President Trump and Vice President Pence, but also making sure that this is not a case where it looks like Harris is carrying all the weight for the campaign because Biden can't be trusted to put a sentence together. And of course, I mean, that's the way he's criticized, that he's just, gaffe prone and this sort of thing. And that's something that I know that a lot of people on the right kind of take delight in, making fun of him for these issues. But it's certainly something that the Democrats have to contend with. And so they just can't hand the ball to Harris and expect her to kind of run up a bunch of touchdowns, because then it's going to become a question of, well, the guy who wants this job, where's he been? And how fit for this job is he? Whatever President Trump ends up getting into in terms of controversy, and he tends to stir things up on a regular basis, he still looks to be more in command of what he says and does than Biden. And that may be an unfair impression of the former vice president, but by the same token, he has not done things like interviews with folks like Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. President Trump didn't do so great against Wallace, but at least he had an interview with him. Biden's just been unavailable. So the longer this sort of thing continues, that Biden is very careful in the interviews that he ends up going on, and Harris ends up taking a much higher profile, obviously now as the nominee, they have to watch it. They don't want a situation where everyone's expecting that Biden is essentially going to be this candidate in name only, and really it's Harris running the show. That's the last thing the Democrats need.
We will wait to see how it all plays out. Less than 3 months until the election date here in 2020. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano. Brian, thanks for coming on the show today.
You bet. Thanks, John.
We'll be back with more Ozarks Tonight right after this.